There are countless horrors that haunt the galaxy, each leaving scars that may never heal. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, extinction is not a distant concept, not a warning, but a constant, suffocating presence. Civilizations rise, flourish briefly, then collapse into ash and silence. Their histories erased as though they had never been. Whole star systems go quiet, their suns still burning, yet the cries and struggles of their populations vanished, either in moments of unimaginable violence or slowly, methodically ground down over centuries. But among all these threats, one xenos species stands apart, not merely a force of destruction, but a creeping, unstoppable contagion. It does not simply break what it touches, it infects, it consumes, it bends reality around its will. It endures beyond comprehension. No matter how many times it is incinerated, bombarded, or scoured from existence, it always returns. Every world it has touched bears invisible scars. Every ruin whispers of its inevitable return. They are the Orks, a laughing, screaming horror that does not die, that cannot be bargained with, that exists only to fight and to spread. Facing them is not a battle, it is the slow recognition of an endless, grinding inevitability. A war against something that refuses to surrender, refuses to obey reason, and refuses to die. The Imperium classifies them as Xenos horribilis maximus, a designation reserved for threats that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be controlled, and cannot be permanently eliminated. This classification, however, fails to convey the true nature of the Ork menace. Orks are not simply a species, they are a biological catastrophe, a self-sustaining ecosystem of violence that spreads through war itself. Physically, Orks are towering, brutish humanoids composed not of mammalian tissue, but dense fungal matter interwoven with muscle, sinew, and bone. Their physiology grants them immense strength, redundant organs, and a resistance to pain that borders on the unnatural. Wounds that would kill a human outright are little more than inconveniences to an Ork. Imperial Medicae reports describe Ork anatomy as a collection of overlapping redundancies rather than a unified system. Multiple hearts pump thick, oxygen-rich blood. Layered muscle fibers continue to function even when partially destroyed. Pain receptors are dulled, not removed, allowing Orks to register damage without being hindered by it. Limbs can be severed and crudely reattached. Organs can be replaced with scavenged machinery or grafted tissue from other Orks. Infection, trauma, and blood loss mean almost nothing. Autopsies have shown that even dead Orks often remain biologically active for minutes after clinical death. Muscle spasms persist. Nervous tissue fires randomly. Spore sacs rupture and release reproductive matter into the surrounding environment. Orks are notoriously difficult to kill, and killing them solves very little. Unlike most intelligent species, Orks do not reproduce sexually. They do not form family units, bloodlines, or ancestral heritage. Instead, they reproduce through spores, constantly shed from their bodies throughout their lives and even more abundantly in death. These spores infiltrate soil, water, ventilation systems, and the smallest cracks in urban infrastructure. They are resistant to radiation, extreme temperatures, and chemical cleansing agents. Standard decontamination protocols are largely ineffective. Every Ork battlefield becomes contaminated. Every ruin, trench, corpse pit, and crater becomes fertile ground. Weeks, months, or years later, new Orks will claw their way up from the soil, fully formed, already violent, already eager for war. This makes Orks uniquely horrifying. They do not need ships to arrive. They do not need reinforcements. If Orks have ever fought on a world, that world is never truly safe again. Imperial colonization records contain countless examples of worlds declared cleansed, only for Ork populations to re-emerge decades later. Settlements vanish overnight. Mining crews are butchered. Entire cities collapse from internal infestation. Ork society is governed by no laws, no ideology, and no centralized authority. It is instead shaped by a single, brutal principle: might makes right. The largest Ork becomes the leader by killing whoever held that position before. That leader remains in power only until someone larger, stronger, or more vicious kills him in turn. This creates an endless cycle of internal violence that paradoxically strengthens the species as a whole. As Orks fight, they grow. Their bodies respond directly to prolonged conflict. Muscle mass increases, bone density thickens. Their already crude intelligence sharpens into something more dangerous. Veteran Orks become knobs. Knobs become war bosses. War bosses become living avatars of destruction, capable of leading planetary invasions through sheer physical dominance and instinctive authority. There is no formal command structure. Orders are followed because disobedience results in immediate and violent death. Coordination emerges not from discipline, but from shared intent. This same instinct governs Ork technology. By any rational measure, Ork weapons should not function. Their firearms are misshapen slabs of metal, loosely assembled with scrap parts and crude ammunition. Their vehicles are welded monstrosities held together by rust, scavenged plating, and engines that scream as if in pain. Their starships are often little more than hollowed asteroids filled with reactors, guns, and bodies. And yet, they work. Imperial scholars have identified the cause as a species-wide psychic phenomenon generated unconsciously by Orks themselves. This effect is known as the Waaagh field. The Waaagh field subtly alters reality in the Orks' favor. It does not break the laws of physics outright. It simply bends them. Weapons fire because Orks believe they should. Engines run because Orks expect them to. Armor plates hold because Orks assume they are tough. Red vehicles go faster. Louder guns hit harder. Bigger machines are more dangerous simply because Orks believe size equals power. The greater the number of Orks gathered together, the stronger this psychic field becomes. In sufficiently large populations, the Waaagh field begins to exert measurable effects on surrounding reality. Machine spirits behave erratically. Astropathic communication becomes unreliable. Psychers report pressure, noise, and invasive thoughts that grow worse as Ork numbers increase. This psychic pressure also manifests through specialized Ork individuals known as Weird Boys. These are Ork shamans, living conduits for the raw energy of the Waaagh. They do not control this power, they endure it. As Ork populations swell, psychic energy builds within Weird Boys until it must be released. When unleashed, it manifests as devastating blasts of warp force, capable of liquefying infantry, rupturing armor, and collapsing structures. The process is violently unstable. Many Weird Boys die in the act, their bodies ruptured from within. Others become possessed, reduced to screaming vessels of uncontrolled psychic discharge. The Orks find this amusing. Ork society also includes numerous lesser subspecies, each fulfilling a role within the greater ecosystem. Grots, or Gretchen, are smaller, weaker orkoid creatures used as slaves, ammunition carriers, and expendable labor. They are beaten, abused, and discarded without thought. Snotlings are even smaller, barely sapient organisms used as fuel, food, or entertainment. Squigs, aggressive, semi-sentient fungal creatures, fulfill countless purposes ranging from livestock to living weapons. Together, these organisms form a complete, self-sustaining war ecology. Every Ork invasion brings not just soldiers, but an entire biosphere of violence. When Orks launch a Waaagh, the galaxy trembles. When Orks launch a Waaagh, it is not a simple invasion. It is a tidal wave of violence, a planetary plague, and a nightmare made flesh. Ork fleets arrive unannounced, ramming through void without strategy, boarding Imperial vessels, tearing apart void stations and shattering defensive formations. In space, their assaults are brutal and close quarters. Boarding parties crash through bulkheads, axes and crude shotguns cutting down crews faster than they can react. The airlocks become death traps. The corridors, rivers of blood, and the screams echo through the ship until only silence remains, punctuated by the manic laughter of greenskins. Orks do not land in organized formations. They spill from drop ships, crashes, and landings wherever they can, flooding cities, industrial complexes, and settlements with overwhelming numbers. There are no defensive lines, no mercy, no quarter. Civilians, caught unprepared, are crushed under the weight of green, screaming bodies. Children and the elderly are devoured by squigs, their high-pitched cries drowned out by gunfire and explosions. Streets twist into chaotic chasms as orks tear apart armored vehicles, tearing engines free and wielding them as blunt weapons. The ground itself seems to rise against humanity. Orks dig tunnels and burrowed passages even as they fight, spawning new waves of attack from the very soil. Gretchen and Snotlings are thrown into the front lines, acting as cannon fodder, living traps, or improvised explosives. Squigs are unleashed like living grenades, feral, snapping, gnashing their teeth into the legs of fleeing civilians or crushing Imperial guardsmen under their bulk. Even the wounded are not safe. Orks stomp on the dying, chew on the fallen, and harvest body parts as crude trophies or tools. Ork vehicles, rusting, welded monstrosities of scrap metal and scrap engines, plow through defenses with no thought for strategy or self-preservation. Battle wagons crush buildings like cardboard. Custom mega cannons obliterate fortifications with random, unpredictable fire. The largest orks, the war bosses, tower over the battlefield like green colossi. Each swing of their power, claws or chain axes, leaves craters and chaos in its wake. Knobs follow them, flanking with crude yet deadly efficiency, tearing apart any organized resistance. Infantry report hearing disembodied laughter, feeling invisible hands tugging at their minds, or seeing their weapons fail in impossible ways. Weird boys, mad conduits of raw ork, psychic energy, erupt with uncontrolled blasts of warp power. Entire city blocks are melted into rubble, humans liquefied in seconds, and walls buckle and twist unnaturally as reality itself bends under orkish belief. Many weird boys perish in the process, but their deaths only add to the psychic frenzy, spreading madness like wildfire across the battlefield. Civilian resistance is almost meaningless. Ork strategy is instinctive and brutal: overwhelm, destroy, and consume. Cities collapse under the volume of ork bodies. Artillery pits are overrun. Defensive bunkers are torn open with chainsaws and ramshackle explosives. Even the terrain is weaponized. Orks pile rubble into battering structures, hurl captured tanks into enemy lines, and hurl themselves like living projectiles. Whole neighborhoods are reduced to smoking ruins as orks fight each other and anything that resists them. And yet, the true horror comes after the battle. Spores saturate the soil. Gretchen scavenge corpses to feed new orks, and the city itself becomes a living breeding ground for future Waaghs. Survivors, if any, wander through streets of twitching bodies and green fungal growths, knowing that the next invasion will arise from the very earth beneath their feet. For decades, the land remembers the war. Rivers swell with orkish blood. Wind carries spores across the planet, and the very soil may sprout teeth and green flesh. No planet is truly safe once touched by orks. Every battlefield is a tomb, every ruin a nursery for the next horror. And as long as orks exist, the war never ends. Cities burn, populations vanish, and even after victory seems possible, whispers of green laughter remind the survivors that the Waaagh will return, and this time the devastation will be worse. This is the true horror of the orks. They cannot be exterminated through conventional means. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be pacified. They do not fear death. They do not mourn their fallen. They do not understand loss. To an orc, war is existence, peace is confusion, and the end of battle is merely an inconvenience before the next one begins. Imperial strategists acknowledge a grim truth. Orcs cannot be defeated, they can only be delayed. Entire worlds have been sacrificed simply to slow their advance. Exterminatus is often the only reliable solution, and even then, spores may survive beneath the ashes. In a galaxy defined by endless war, the Orks are not an aberration. They are its purest expression. A laughing, screaming, ever-growing horror that does not care who you are, what you believe, or how long your species has endured. They will fight you. They will infest your world. And long after you are gone, they will still be there, laughing, brawling, waiting, because for the Orks, the war never ends.